Have you ever felt like you're running, even when you're standing still? Like no matter how much you do, the work, the family, the endless giving, your heart never really rests? That was me. Always serving, always showing up, yet silently wondering, is this how life is supposed to be? I used to believe rest was something you had to earn, after the chores were done, after everyone else was fine, after I'd proven I was strong enough. But one ordinary week changed everything. A fight at work, burnout, anxiety, even a toxic colleague who pushed me past my limit. All of it became the stage where God whispered a truth I'd been too busy to hear. What if peace doesn't come after the storm, but inside it? What if redemption isn't some distant miracle, but a quiet decision made in the middle of your doubts and difficulties? I discovered that real faith isn't about escaping life's noise. It's about finding stillness within it. And when I finally did, something happened that I can only describe as divine. Stay with me until the end, because what I'm about to share might just be the one thing your soul's been waiting to hear. And if you believe even a little that God still speaks through ordinary lives like ours, hit that subscribe button right now so you don't miss what's coming next. Because this isn't just a story about exhaustion. It's about a woman's life redeemed, one quiet moment at a time. I woke up this morning feeling like my heart had already run a marathon. The week was a blur. Meetings, reports, deadlines, endless messages from my boss, and that one colleague who seems to take joy in stirring conflict. By Friday, I wasn't just tired. I was spiritually drained. My mind couldn't focus. My prayers were scattered. And even small things at home felt overwhelming. Between my kids' school projects, after-class rehearsals, and last-minute costume fixes, I could barely catch my breath. It felt like I was living in a constant state of anxiety, pulled between work and family, trying to hold everything together. I knew I was slipping, but I couldn't stop. My heart longed for redemption, for a moment of stillness. Yet I kept pushing, because that's what a woman's life often demands, endurance beyond measure. At one point, while driving home, I found myself whispering a quiet prayer, not out of discipline, but out of exhaustion. I didn't even plan the words. They just poured out. Lord Jesus Christ, have mercy on me. I'd heard this prayer many times before, the one that rests the heart when it's too tired to speak. But this time it felt different. It wasn't about ritual, it was about survival. The contrition wasn't polished, it was raw. I could feel my doubts rising like a tide. Does God really see my burnout? Does he understand the mess of my everyday difficulties? Then, like a gentle reminder, Psalm 46:10 came to mind. Be still and know that I am God. And right there, sitting in traffic, I felt the faint whisper of redemption stir inside me. Still, the next day didn't make things magically easier. My colleague was colder than ever, and the workload doubled. My attention drifted, and my patience wore thin. It's hard to stay peaceful when your inbox is full and your child forgot their lunchbox again. But I began to notice something. Each time I caught myself spiraling into frustration, I paused. Just a breath, a short inner prayer, a small act of surrender. That's when I realized peace isn't about escaping life's noise. It's about letting God meet me right in the middle of it. Redemption doesn't wait for perfect circumstances. It's shaped in the storm itself. Later that evening, as I prepared dinner and listened to my children argue about who would wash the dishes, I smiled. Somehow, even in the chaos, I could sense grace weaving through it all. The dinner burned a little. The phone rang nonstop, and my husband came home late again. But my heart didn't react the same way. I was beginning to understand that contrition wasn't just guilt, it was awareness. Awareness of how much I need God not only when I fail, but when I move too fast and forget him. In every woman's struggle, there's a quiet invitation to return, to stop confusing busyness with holiness. By Sunday morning, as I finally sat down in church, the whole week replayed in my mind. The faces, the words, the fatigue. But under it all, a deeper rhythm had formed. Prayer breathing beneath the noise. I didn't need to do more to feel close to God. I needed to be still long enough to remember he was already there. That's the mystery of faith, the redemption of the ordinary. It doesn't erase our doubts or difficulties, but it transforms them into sacred moments. Sitting there, I felt something shift. a small victory of peace over anxiety, of stillness over burnout. I wasn't healed completely, but I was learning to rest without guilt. Saturday morning came, and for the first time in days, the house was quiet. No alarms, no school lunches to pack, no urgent emails flashing on my phone. I should have felt relieved, but instead I woke up with that familiar ache, the guilt of stopping. My mind kept whispering that I was wasting time. There were laundry piles to conquer, groceries to buy, floors to mop. Even my prayers sounded rushed, like I was trying to earn rest instead of receiving it. I could feel that restless tension between body and soul, the kind every woman knows too well. My thoughts were crowded with doubts. If I stop, will everything fall apart? Am I being lazy or faithful? It's strange how difficult it is to simply rest when life has trained us to always fix, solve, and give. As I poured my coffee and stared out the window, the sunlight fell across the table in a way that stopped me for a moment. It was quiet, so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat. I remembered the words of Jesus. "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." Matthew 11:28. I've read that verse countless times, but that morning it hit differently. Rest isn't a reward. It's an invitation. It's not weakness, it's worship. My contrition took another shape that day. Not asking forgiveness for what I'd done, but for how little I allowed myself to just be. I realized that my redemption wasn't hiding in my busyness. It was waiting in my surrender. The kids eventually woke up, their laughter bouncing through the house, the smell of toast filling the kitchen. And still, something inside me resisted the peace. I kept glancing at my phone, thinking of unfinished work, of that colleague who might already be emailing about next week. The guilt felt heavy, like I needed permission to enjoy my own family. That's when I noticed how burnout had trained my attention to stay on high alert, always scanning for the next thing to fix. Maybe that's what sin does. It distracts us from grace by making us think we're indispensable. But God's love doesn't need my constant effort. It needs my trust. I whispered another prayer. "Teach me to rest, Lord, the way you rested on the seventh day." Later that afternoon, I sat outside with a blanket and a book I never got to finish. The kids were running barefoot through the yard, chasing each other with sticks and laughter. I smiled, realizing that peace isn't loud. It doesn't shout to be noticed. It's gentle, like redemption itself. It visits quietly, in small holy pauses. For once, I didn't check my phone. I didn't think about Monday. I just watched my children, their joy untouched by deadlines or expectations. And I thought, maybe this is what holiness looks like in a woman's life, learning to stop without guilt, to let joy breathe again. As the sun began to set, I felt that familiar urge to plan, to make lists, to anticipate the next wave of responsibilities. But instead, I sat still. I let the silence become my prayer. There was no grand revelation, no booming voice from heaven, just a calm awareness that I was held. Rest wasn't laziness. It was faith in motion. It was trusting that even when I stop, God keeps working. And maybe, just maybe, that's the redemption I'd been chasing all week. The grace to rest without guilt, and the courage to believe that my worth doesn't depend on how much I do, but on who I belong to. Sunday morning should have felt like peace, but my mind was already miles away before I even reached the church. I sat in the pew, pretending to listen, nodding through the hymns, while my thoughts tangled around next week's meeting, that unfinished report, and the colleague who seemed determined to test my patience. The incense floated gently in the air, but my heart was restless. Is this how life is supposed to be? I whispered it almost without realizing. The question echoed in my mind like a prayer I didn't know how to pray. Even surrounded by people, I felt alone, carrying the invisible weight of a woman's life that never really pauses. Family, work, the endless cycle of expectations. It all blurred into one quiet ache. The pastor spoke about redemption that morning, about how grace often hides in plain sight. But I couldn't help thinking, if grace is everywhere, why do I feel so absent? I bowed my head, trying to silence the noise in my mind, yet my attention kept wandering back to my inbox. I felt guilty even for being distracted in the presence of God. That guilt grew heavy, turning into contrition, not for something I'd done wrong, but for how easily my heart drifts away. I thought of Martha and Mary, the way Jesus said Mary chose what was better by sitting at his feet, Luke 10:42. I wanted to be Mary, but most days I felt like Martha, tired, anxious, and endlessly busy, even in sacred spaces. When the choir began to sing, something in me softened. Their voices rose like sunlight breaking through a gray sky, and for a brief moment I stopped thinking. I just breathed. That's when it hit me. Maybe this is how life is supposed to be, not perfect, but constantly turning back. Redemption isn't a single moment. It's the quiet rhythm of returning, again and again, even after distraction, even after burnout. God doesn't ask for flawless attention. He asks for a willing heart. I realized that my doubts weren't a lack of faith. They were part of the dialogue of faith itself, the tug between heaven and earth that keeps me seeking. As I looked around, I noticed other women in the pews, some holding toddlers, some sitting alone, some staring off just like I was. It comforted me in a strange way to know that maybe they were fighting the same battle. Women's struggles often hide behind polite smiles and Sunday dresses. We carry so much, families, responsibilities, silent fears, and still show up. Maybe that's a kind of worship too. The thought brought tears to my eyes, not from sadness, but from recognition. We are all learning to meet God in the middle of our difficulties, not after they're gone. By the end of the service, I didn't have answers. My job still awaited. My worries hadn't vanished. But something inside me shifted. I realized that redemption doesn't erase exhaustion. It redeems it. The same place that felt like burnout yesterday could become prayer today if I let it. Maybe this is how life is supposed to be after all. Imperfect, messy, but holy in the trying. As I walked out into the sunlight, I felt a quiet peace. Not because everything was fixed, but because for once, I wasn't trying to fix it. By Sunday evening, I finally felt like I could breathe. Dinner was done. The kids were giggling in their rooms, and the house carried that soft quiet that only comes at the end of a long week. I sank into the couch, wrapped in my blanket, whispering a small prayer of thanks. For once, I wasn't asking for anything. I was just grateful. My heart was lighter than it had been in days. I thought maybe I was finally learning how to rest without guilt. And then, right in the middle of that peace, my phone rang. The name on the screen made my stomach tighten. That colleague, the one whose voice could drain my joy faster than any deadline. I hesitated, but curiosity won. I answered. Her tone was sharp, coated with false sweetness, the kind that sounds polite but cuts anyway. Within minutes, she was back to the same toxic rhythm. Complaints, manipulation, subtle blame. I tried to listen with grace, but I could feel my chest tightening again. The calm of the evening began slipping away like sand through my fingers. Every word pulled me back into the chaos I'd just escaped. For a moment I wanted to snap, to defend myself, to fight back. But something in me whispered, "Don't feed the fire." Instead, I closed my eyes and silently repeated the prayer that had carried me all week. Lord Jesus Christ, have mercy on me. I breathed slowly, focusing my attention not on her tone, but on my own heart. When the call ended, I sat there in silence, staring at the wall. My emotions were tangled: anger, guilt, disappointment. Why do I let her steal my peace? I whispered to myself. That old doubt crept in again. Maybe I'm too soft, too forgiving, too naive. But another voice, quieter and deeper, reminded me that redemption often begins with restraint. It's not about winning arguments. It's about protecting what God is building inside me. My contrition wasn't about weakness this time. It was about recognizing how fragile peace really is, and how easily I trade it away. I wanted to learn how to guard it better, not by walls of pride, but by the stillness of trust. I walked into the kitchen and poured myself some water. The kids were laughing from the other room, and the sound grounded me again. Their joy was untouched by all the adult drama that seemed to fill my world. It reminded me that most of life's difficulties don't demand immediate action, just a faithful pause. Maybe that's the hardest lesson for any woman. Not every battle deserves our full attention. Sometimes the holiest thing we can do is step back and let God handle what we can't. My mind wandered to the verse, "The Lord will fight for you." You need only to be still. Exodus 14:14. Those words wrapped around my heart like a balm. Later that night, as I tucked my kids into bed, I thought about how much of my life had been shaped by these moments, small interruptions that test everything I believe. Maybe this is where real faith is forged, not in the quiet mornings of prayer, but in the interruptions we don't expect. I smiled faintly, realizing that even this call, as frustrating as it was, had become part of my redemption story. Peace wasn't something I could hold on to by force. It was something I had to keep surrendering over and over. As I turned off the lights and finally lay down, I whispered again, "Lord, teach me to rest, even when the world doesn't." Monday morning came with that strange mix of tension and relief that always follows a storm. The office felt quieter than usual, almost too quiet. People whispered near the coffee machine, glancing toward the manager's office, where the door stayed closed longer than normal. I had a feeling something was happening, but I didn't expect it to be that. When I finally saw her, the same colleague who'd called me the night before, she looked smaller somehow, her confidence cracked. A few hours later, the news spread through the building. She'd been let go. I just sat there, staring at my computer, unsure what to feel. Part of me wanted to feel justified. After all, she'd caused so much pain. But another part of me, the deeper part, only felt sorrow. Bitterness tried to rise like a familiar tide, but it met something stronger inside me. Something that had been quietly growing all week. Mercy. When she walked out of her office, holding a box with her things, our eyes met. She looked embarrassed, angry, and scared all at once. For a split second, I hesitated. Should I look away, pretend to be busy? But before I could think, I stood up and walked toward her. My heart was pounding. Everything in me screamed to protect myself, to stay distant. But something softer led me instead. I reached out and hugged her. It wasn't rehearsed or symbolic. It was instinctive, like grace moving through my body faster than thought. She froze at first, then started crying quietly. In that moment, I understood what redemption really feels like. Not triumphant, not proud, but tender and trembling. Forgiveness isn't easy. It's the kind of strength no one claps for. After she left, I went back to my desk and sat for a while, staring at my hands. They were still shaking, but not from anger, from release. I thought about how many times I'd replayed our arguments, how many nights I'd wasted trying to justify myself in my mind. And yet, the moment I chose compassion, all that noise fell silent. Contrition isn't just about confessing sin. It's about letting go of the parts of your heart that keep you chained to someone else's mistakes. I didn't fix her and I didn't change what happened, but I felt peace, real peace. The kind that comes only when you decide to mirror the love you've been given, even when it hurts. On the drive home I cried, not from sadness, but from the strange mixture of exhaustion and gratitude that follows a deep act of obedience. I thought about Jesus on the cross saying, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." Luke 23:34. Those words used to sound unreachable to me, like something only saints could live by. But that morning, I caught a glimpse of what they really meant. Forgiveness isn't about being okay with what happened. It's about refusing to let resentment dictate your story. It's about giving God room to write a better ending. I whispered through tears, "Lord, thank you for teaching me to choose mercy over memory." That evening, as I sat with my family at dinner, the conversation was light, the kids loud, the house warm. But somewhere deep inside, I carried a quiet awareness. This is what we're called to. Not perfection, not control, but the quiet courage to love when it costs us something. My difficulties hadn't disappeared. Life would still bring burnout, anxiety, long days, and the mess of being human. But something sacred had shifted. Redemption had stopped being an idea. It had become my reality. I realized that this is what we Christians are supposed to be. Not flawless, but faithful in the small moments where grace has to choose sides, and we choose love.